So how do we create a basic knitr document? So I'm going to talk about this in the context of RStudio because I think it's the easiest way to do it. There are other ways to do this, so this is not really exclusive to RStudio, but it's just the example that I'll show here will be in RStudio. So if you click on the new document button on the upper left, you'll see there are a variety of options, and you can click the R Markdown option to create a new Markdown file that'll have your text and code. So here's your a basic R Markdown document. So R Markdown is basically Markdown with R code embedded in it. You can see that what I have here is a basic symbol that indicates that I'm going to start a code chunk. So when I have the 3 backticks and then the curly braces and then an R and then a closed curly brace, that indicates that I'm starting a code chunk. So you can see I have 3 lines of R code here. I got set seed, I generate some random normal variables, and then I just take the mean. And then I close this code chunk with 3 backticks. And so you can see above this shaded area with the code, I've got text. So the title is my first knitr document, and then I say just a line of text that says this is some text, and I say here's a code chunk, and then I start the code chunk. So in RStudio, you'll have this document open, and you'll have the code chunk and the text chunk there together, and the idea is that if you want to process the knitr document and create some human readable output, so the idea is that you want to run the R code so you execute these 3 lines of R code, and then you want to put the output from that R code embedded in your document. And what's the output of this R code? Well, it's only one thing that happens. You calculate the mean. So it's going to generate the mean, and it'll be whatever the mean happens to be for that simulated data set. So it's very easy in RStudio. You can just push the knit HTML button, and it will automatically run everything for you. If you're not using RStudio, the way you can do this is you can load the knitr package with the library function. You can make sure your working directory is set to wherever the R Markdown document is located. Typically, R Markdown documents will have a capital RMD extension. It's not necessary, but it's just a good way to identify these types of files. You can use the knit to HTML function if you want to create a web page as your output, and it will automatically process the R Markdown file and run the R code and put the output within the file. And then within R, if you want to open this in your web browser, you can use the browse URL function. It will create a new file, the knit to HTML function will take your R Markdown document, create an HTML file with the same name, and then you can open in your web browser. So here's the output that you would get. This is the HTML format output that you would get. You can see that there's a title in large text, there's some regular text. The code is kind of in the shaded box. And then the output from that code is directly below it. Here you can see that the mean is 0.1089. So that's the output that came from the mean function. So in your so what happens here is that knitr takes your original R Markdown document, we can see on the left here, and it processes it into a regular Markdown document. And so you can see that the one thing that happens is that it takes your code, and then it reproduces the code in the regular Markdown document. But you can see that in the Markdown document there's one extra piece, which is that the result of the code, which is down here at the bottom. And so the result of evaluating the R code is added to the Markdown document after evaluating the R code. So, when you create, for a couple of things. First of all, when you create the new knitr document in RStudio, it will populate that document with some kind of generic filler text. So the first thing you probably want to do is just delete it, because that's not going to be relevant to whatever you want to do, most likely. Code chunks begin with the 3 backticks and the curly braces with an R, and you end a code chunk with the 3 backticks. All of your R code will go between these markers. Now you can have more than one code chunk. You can have as many code chunks as you want, so you don't have to put all of the R code within the code chunk, but any R code that you do have goes in a code chunk indicated by the 3 backticks. You can have names for your code chunks, so you can name them immediately after the curly brace and the R, you can put a name. It can be anything you want, and then you can close it with a curly brace. And then by default, the code in the code chunk will be echoed in the output document. So just like in the HTML document, you saw that it echoed the code and then it gave you the result of that code. By default, all the code chunks you'll be able to see in the document the code that was produced.